Good morning, everyone. Happy Tuesday morning to you. Welcome back to Morning Musings. I do appreciate you being with me so very, very much here on Morning Musings. Be sure to tell your friends, your neighbors. You know, my subscription list continues to grow as more and more people start tuning in, and the responses continue to be extremely positive. Oh, there are always a few naysayers, what have you, but that's to be expected. Jesus certainly didn't get 100% accepted, so somebody like me certainly is not. But anyway, do not forget, as we continue in this study, to take advantage of the special pricing on book offers that I make to you. For the rest of this month, the 3-book special, regular price on those 3 books, Daniel chapter 12, verse 2, Fulfilled or Future, Like Father, Like Son on Clouds of Glory, and Blast from the Past, The Truth About Armageddon. Regular price, $61. Your total delivered price, $40. Just go to my website, DonKPreston.com, BibleProphecy.com. There's a banner right up at the top. Well, yesterday, I called your attention to Matthew chapter 24 and verse 28. Jesus said, where the body is, patoma, carcass, Latin would be something similar to cadaver. So the imagery is pretty graphic and it's unmistakable. Where the carcass is, there will the eagles be gathered also. Now, by the way, Luke chapter 17, verse 37 is a directly parallel passage in a context just like Matthew chapter 24 that absolutely demands a first century context. Notice that this whole thing is set within the context of the Great Tribulation. Well, upon whom would the Great Tribulation come? Upon Israel. When you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet, let the one who reads understand, then let those in Judea flee. Oh, and by the way, the reason for that is because of the coming tribulation. That would be focused in. Doesn't mean it wouldn't have, peripheral impact, but the focus of it would be Judea. Therefore, get out of town. But notice, this great tribulation, this time of distress, this time of destruction, this time of desolation, would be the time of the carcass. And by the way, it would be the time in which, if a man is on his rooftops, don't let him come down, flee. Folks, that's the time of the carcass, when the Great Tribulation would be there. The Great Tribulation would lead directly to Israel as the carcass. Now, pardon me. What we have to understand here is that there is a well-established Old Covenant background for the idea that in the last days, the Lord God would kill Israel. In Isaiah chapter 65, and I obviously don't have time to develop it fully, but in Isaiah chapter 65, it foretold the calling of the Gentiles, the calling of a people over whom God had never ruled, the calling of a people that had never been called by his name, the calling of a people that had never sought him. Isaiah 65, 1 and 2. Well, guess what? Paul, in Romans 9 and in Romans 10, 20 and following, quotes those verses verbatim and applies it to his mission to the Gentiles, a people that were not a people. But then Isaiah also said that at that time, in the days of the calling of the Gentiles and the calling of the pagans, once again, those who had never been called by the name of the Lord, those who had never worshiped the Lord, in those days, the Lord said that Israel would fill up the measure of their father's guilt, verses 6 and following. And the Lord would destroy them, although he would save a remnant. As one says of the new wine that is in the cluster, do not destroy it all, because there is a blessing in it. Isaiah 65:8. The Lord says, so I will not destroy them all. Salvation of the remnant. Paul said the salvation of the remnant was being saved in his day. Romans 9, Romans 10, Romans 11. Then in Isaiah 65 and verse 13, after accusing Israel of their sins, multiple sins, filling up the measure of their sins, in that last days period, the Lord said, the Lord God will slay you and call his people by another name. Well, if you kill somebody, you got a corpse, don't you? And by the way, when the Lord was speaking of the fall of Jerusalem in 586 BC, in Jeremiah chapter 26, 18 and following, Jeremiah predicted the fall of that city, and he cited Micah, the previous prophet, who had said, Jerusalem shall be plowed under like a field. No place can be found for her. Well, guess what? The Jewish rabbis in Jesus' day also applied that to AD 70. They understood that AD 70 was the fulfillment of Old Covenant prophecy. They understood, guess what? That's where the carcass was. Now ask yourself the question. Those who try to make Matthew chapter 24 and verse 28 apply to some future time, what's the carcass? Now, I shared with you yesterday, it cannot be talking about one singular individual. If so, then somebody's got to produce the proof of that. It's not predicting the death and thus the corpse of one single individual. It is talking about a corporate death. So ask yourself the question, at this time of the Lord's coming, okay? Verse 26, verse 27, for as the lightning flashes from the east and to the west, so also shall the coming of the Son of Man be, for where the corpse is, there will the vultures be gathered. So the corpse is at the time of the coming of the Lord, the coming of the Son of Man. What is the corpse in the futurist paradigm? Well, here's a point. Number one, it can't be the church. The church will never be a corpse. It will never pass away. Jesus, sitting on the throne of David, ruling in the kingdom, he has a rule, a throne, and a kingdom that will never end. Luke 1, 32 to 33. So pretty obviously, the corpse can't refer to the church. What other corporate entity then, in any proposed futurist paradigm, what is the corpse? You've got to identify the corpse. Oh, not just any old corpse will do. It has to be the corpse that suffers the Great Tribulation. It has to be the corpse that committed the abomination of desolation. Or it has to be the body that committed those heinous crimes and as a result became the corpse. That doesn't apply to anyone, to anything other than Old Covenant Judaism that ended in AD 70. So when we look at Matthew chapter 24 and verse 28, well, it may seem, just kind of a passing reference. No. There's a prophetic background for it of God promising that in the last days, in order to bring in the new creation. Just think about that. We'll get to that tomorrow. Just think about that. In order to bring in the new creation, God was going to destroy the old. The Lord God will slay you. That's the biblical concept behind the body, the corpse of Matthew 24 and verse 28. And like I said, we'll talk more about that on Wednesday. See you on the flip side.